how do you think that newsrooms should be innovating and adapting their coverage or their strategies to account for, not just the proliferation of disinformation, but the very real threat of fascism to press freedom?
Sorry, let me try to take that on. So, there's quite a lot of innovation out there, I'm sure. But one of the things that we need to learn, to start doing in the Philippines really is to form consensus among newsrooms in relation to known facts and known truths. Because if we don't do that, then you're actually like, the problem with the Philippine media, if you ask me, is that we're so which is I think true also of all other media and industries in other countries. Like that level of competitiveness is there. I mean, and we compete, which is fine, and it's part of the whole value of that freedom of the press, because you then let a thousand flowers bloom, right? But the problem with just letting that competition rule the show and not like considering consensus also on certain established truths is that then you're not drum beating that, you're not pointing out that, hey, this is a lie that has been made like several times and it's being reiterated over and over again. Newsrooms need to say that and like in unison. It cannot be like one newsroom just saying it now and then another newsroom. It needs to be there, needs to be reiterated.
Let me just jump in also. I've always questioned how newsrooms have arranged their reporting according to beats. And I have nothing against, the concept of it, the beat system, because we've seen some incredible reporting also coming from the beats. Like we have examples of Mike here. And also this is the beats are where the news the news agenda is also presented. The reporters are able to challenge the authorities and powers that be and question them. And actually, the concept of it is to put the agenda of the people, concerns of the current, the concerns of the public there as a forum. So the beats are very important venues in a democracy. But how we've actually approached beats as newsrooms, as media organizations, I guess, in the past decade, in a way to also cope with the economic demands on us, is that we just jump from one topic to the next, and there are many things that fall into the cracks there. The gaps that are not covered when one person is just focused on Malacanang, for example, and even if that topic is also taken up in another beat, these topics are not really put together. But there was a practice. There's been a long practice that has been employed in print journalism for a long time. We call it wrapping the story, but it's just coming from that beat. And so the challenge now is for individual journalists to actually step aside, step back, and look at what are really the topics here that matter, and what kind of other information that I have to collate, question, and focus it there. So it's really the interdisciplinary kind of reporting, and for us, it has done. It works so far in terms of making some issues, focusing on some issues, following them up, by not really putting so much importance to that territorial aspect of the practice of the beats. So it's also important then to have beats that are not just the territory, or not just on Duterte, for example, but if Duterte is saying something about human rights, or saying something about foreign policy or the rule of law, let the reporters have specializations on that, jump in and cover that aspect of what the president is saying. It's not just the Malacanang reporter. So we've seen that as some sort of a formula also for us, especially with few resources at hand.
I agree with Camille. I think it was evident in the recent speech of the president. And just to cite as an example, for example, Raptors Piranada was covering the speech of the president. She was fact checking, but at the same time, their reporter covering the vice president was also tweeting, was also fact checking. So that's an example of how reporters from different beats can actually work together in covering the speech of the president to make sure that all the statements are actually fact checked. Unfortunately, that's not the case with other news agencies. Usually, you have one reporter covering everything, and if it's in Malacanang, everything that the president says will be reported. If it's in the Senate or in the House, everything that's being tackled about whether it's budget of another agency, that will be reported as well. But you do miss the kind of expertise that a person covering the beat will have, the stock knowledge that a person will have if you don't have him cover that particular aspect as well. That said, the difficulty here is that will you require now all your reporters to monitor all the speeches of the president, because you never know what the president will say. We never expected the president to say anything about Lenny Robredo at the time he made the speech. So will we now require our reporters covering the vice president to be on standby every time the president makes a speech? And the same goes for the Senate, for the House, and probably the health department, where also you have some controversies in the Department of Health. So that's a tricky question. How do you now manage your newsroom? Do you put your reporters on call? That's, I think the editors can answer.
Yeah, that's tough. That's all I can say. It's been tough. But yeah, there is some sort of rule that we follow. Of course, there's the one covering the president at that moment, and then the person also says this topic is assigned to you. This topic is assigned to you. Like there's that sort of informal conversation going on, informal coordination, just so people would be, the report would not just be breaking news in a he said she said format, but would actually harness whatever knowledge that you've had that you already have in the newsroom, the specializations that you've developed. But it's tricky on a day-to-day basis. People are just it's easy to get tired. It's easy to really get frustrated, especially now with so many platforms to handle, fewer hands to do so. Maybe Gemma also has some experience there.
Yeah, so for our part, what we try to do, because it's really tricky. Like the beat system has always been organized in location based, really, rather than thematic. What we did in the past few years is that we started doing these clusters, editorial clusters. Well, actually not just editorial clusters. It's not yet a perfect system, but basically you have different parts of the newsroom clustering around thematic areas. Like for instance, my cluster is digital media and democracy, looking at that the impact of media on democratic discourse. So that's my cluster, and that's basically looking at the information ecosystem, and what that means is that there's still the usual sections and units, but that's putting together various heads in a single thread, just so we're sharing information with each other, and that's helping guide coverage around particular issues. But I agree, it's hard to operationalize. We're still trying to perfect that process. We also have a governance cluster, for instance, because like it or not, you have all these different agencies and layers of government, and it's so hard to also perfect coverage around those. But the point of it is to have editors, then senior editors who are who have done coverage in various in these specific issues, being able to help and input and guide the coverage as it goes on. So it's still a work in progress, but that's what we're trying to do now.
And I should also point out that what's tricky here is that the speeches come in at about 11 p.m. 12 midnight. So do you expect your reporters to stay up late each time the president says something? So
That's so true.
That should be banned altogether. It should not.
Watching real time, I just watch after.
That's right. It should not be normalized. Can't have a president's speech for midnight snack. It's not healthy.
Just to add, I agree with everything that's been said, but I think in order for newsrooms to truly innovate, especially traditional media, is to understand the institutional factors that set the boundaries for reporting and interpretation. Number one is corporate ownership, of course. Second, how the type of government we have influences how the major media frames and reports issues more or less the way dominant forces want them reported, or what we call the chilling effect. So the newsroom really has to give their daily beat reporters a time to step back or a time to reflect from the ground in order to look for openings. Because there are openings. There are openings for investigative reporting in whatever beat you handle. And there are people in the media who look for them and find them and write them effectively. So it's just giving the daily reporters a chance to really reflect on these expertise that they're supposed to have. Some of the best known investigative reporters are even more cynical about the media than media critics. So they just want to find ways to work within the system and present stories that matter to the public effectively. But that would require waiting for a time to do the legwork, to do the rigorous research. So it's really how the newsroom enables them to do that. They could look for an opening, but if the newsroom really won't give them the opportunity to pound on that opening, then newsrooms won't really innovate that much. Will still be stuck on the traditional daily beat reporting.
If I may also just add, and I agree with everyone what everyone has said in the call. I think it's also important to involve our readers in the process, in that we empower them with, we teach them to value truthfulness, we teach them to value accuracy, to think critically, because when our readers are empowered with information, when they're empowered to think critically, then that also keeps us in check, to become more objective, or like to include more context or truthfulness to be truthful and to have context in our reporting. And yeah, and having citizens involved, apart from keeping us as journalists in check, that also makes them keep politicians or any people in power in check as well.